Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined on this Thursday morning ahead of Week 15 by Andrew Erickson and Pat Fitzmaurice. Fellas, it is the fantasy playoffs for most teams. At least we are here. We have made it. We were talking a little bit on Tuesday, Erickson, kind of the number of teams that we are even still alive for. Fitz, how did you do this year in terms of making the playoffs?
Pretty good in redraft. Much better than in Dynasty. So, yeah, I've got a number of teams still alive. I don't know if I'm the prohibitive favorite in any of those, but I'm also not dead money in any of them either. So it's going to be fun. And, I know in a couple of my home leagues, I am playing the same very good friend in two of them back to back. So I was just telling him that, we might not be friends after this week, depending on how things shake out. But yeah, man, this is what we play for. We are here and I'm excited about it.
I think I am the same. We didn't talk about the distinction between Dynasty and Redraft. I think I have performed better in Redraft this year. All the teams that I have a bye, all the teams that like the higher percentage of teams that I made the playoffs, it was Redraft, not Dynasty. And I don't know what to attribute that to other than just
why do you think it was? What did you get right this year with your redraft teams?
I didn't get right a lot at the top. We were actually just talking a bit about how Erickson had Jamar Chase as his number one player in the rankings this year. And so I kind of pulled up my rankings to remind myself where my draft rankings looked like, and they looked really bad. I was talked into Breece Hall number one, which hasn't worked out. I had Chase down at 7, which I don't even remember putting him there, but I really obviously don't feel good about that one. I think what I did very well on this year in redraft is a lot of those mid-round picks and the later round picks. I think early I didn't really distinguish myself, but I hit on a lot of these. Like I had Chase Brown in a lot of places. That has been super helpful. The one early pick I did very well on is I got Derrick Henry literally everywhere I was able to get him in the second round. He was just my pick of choice, which obviously was very helpful as well. Are there any players that stand out for you, Fitz, that did a good job?
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it, it's funny because I went sort of with a hero RB approach. And in a couple instances, the hero RB was Isaiah Pacheco, which was the wrong hero to pick, as injury luck would have it. And, I was pretty robust with wide receivers and like it was a minefield as far as wide receiver injuries. So like I had Chris Olave on a lot of teams. Obviously, that didn't work out with injuries. Mike Evans was a frequently drafted guy. He missed a lot of playing time. Maybe the reason why I'm still punching with a lot of teams, for the first time in like a decade, I got tight end right. Like I was drafting either George Kittle or Brock Bowers this year. Those were my two tight end targets. So other than like one Mark Andrews team, those were my tight ends on pretty much every redraft team. And, that wound up being the right code at tight end.
Yeah, I really wanted to make sure I was getting one of those top 7 tight ends on draft day. And as long as I was doing that and that one of those 7 wasn't Kyle Pitts or I guess Sam Laporta, who I never got, then that was largely working. McBride was the one for me where I got a lot of, and even if he's not getting touchdowns, obviously that's been a successful one. What about you, Erickson? Who's kind of carried your teams this year?
Well, the team that I care about the most, I think I talked about it on one of these earlier shows, is Puka Nacua. It's funny because I remember reading the ECR article that said that Puka Nacua was going to be like the biggest bust this year. And after week 1, you're like, sick, we were right. Like he was horrible. And it's funny because a lot of what we remember is all about the anchor biases from the beginning of the season, right? It's the guys that were bad to start. Again, Mark Andrews, people still think he's a bust, but even though he's been on like a touchdown streak, he's actually kind of been back to where we kind of expected him to be, even though when we think back at Andrews, like, oh, huge bust, Mark Andrews this season. But when you look at the final stats, you're like, oh, actually, because he finally started catching touchdowns. It's like, oh, he actually did have a recently good year for the tight end position. I think kind of the similar thing with Puka Nacua. I mean, dude, points per game. I don't know where he is, but he's got to be in like the top 5, top 3. I know that this week he's like inside the top 3 wide receivers because when that guy's healthy, like he is just unstoppable. So something to kind of keep in mind when we kind of do the season review reflections after the postseason ends, like, yes, it's important how you start and who you draft, but ultimately how you win is how you finish. So I think that's something really important to look on. And I know that, again, I feel like the show was very Chase Brown pro, like from Fitz to myself. Like I loved Chase Brown, and I think a lot of people have him because of us. So I think that was definitely one of our biggest hits of this season. Definitely a player that I'm leaning on a lot in a couple places.
Yeah, to that point, like I took Rashee Rice in a lot of places. That was a correct draft decision, and then doesn't.
Same thing with Chris Godwin, right?
Yeah.
Like I was like, oh, Chris Godwin, like going to be a smash, and he was a smash until he got hurt.
It's funny. I'm looking now at like what I had in the top 12, and it's like because I said I didn't really do well with the early round picks. I'm not sure how I could have. Breece Hall obviously disappointing. CeeDee Lamb quarterback got hurt. Bijan Robinson good. Not the kind of next level I expected, but good. Christian McCaffrey, we know what happened there. Justin Jefferson just had this 6-week stretch of slumping. Tyreek Hill, obviously all the Tua stuff has hurt him. Chase, good. Amon-Ra St. Brown, good. Jonathan Taylor, disappointing. Garrett Wilson, disappointing. AJ Brown, apparently he and Jalen Hurts hate each other now. I mean, like there were a lot of minefields to dodge in the first round of drafts this year. So
yeah, we obsess so much over the first round of drafts, like in August and July, but really it's what you do after. I mean, like the one league this year where I drafted Saquon Barkley, I managed to miss the playoffs. I have a partner in that league. Like everything else we did in our draft, like just blew up in our faces, including rolling with Caleb Williams as our starting quarterback right out of the gate. So yeah, I mean, it's funny how that happens, and we do obsess a lot over the first round, but really it's everything you do after that matters so much more.
I was painfully low on both Chase and Saquon, and that's going to really come back to bite me. I expect. All right, this is our Thursday start sit show. Just a quick reminder for everybody, as we get into the fantasy playoffs, we are still doing rankings and everything all season long up till the end. So all of our weekly consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. All right, guys, let's dive into the waiver wire ads, guys, that we picked up earlier in the week. Are we starting or sitting them in week 15? Fitz, I'll start with you. Sincere McCormick, are we starting him in week 15?
Startable. I've got him just outside running back 2 range at running back 28. Doesn't have the easiest matchup. The Falcons have allowed the 7th fewest fantasy points to running backs, but I do love McCormick's matchup. If you get by week 15, in week 16 and 17, he gets the Jaguars and the Saints. So he could be a nice engine propelling you to fantasy championships if you get by this week. I don't know. Like I'm intrigued by this late season audition he's getting with the Raiders, who have not really given us a lot of running back value this season. And I am vowing never again to be too low on a smaller, slower running back who didn't time well in the 40-yard dash. And McCormick is another one of these guys. I faded Kyron Williams. I faded Bucky Irving. I'm not going to fade Sincere McCormick, or at least try not to. So yeah, I can't wait to see what he's going to do, but I'm not all that excited about starting him this week.
He's at an ECR for half PPR scoring RB27. Erickson, is that too high, too low, or just right for McCormick?
I think that's just right. I have him as RB28. I think you got to keep in mind though with running backs this week, I think you're only looking at McCormick as like a flex play, unless you're just like totally down bad at the running back position, because we have all 32 teams playing this week, and all the running backs are healthy, right? So I really think McCormick and a lot of these guys you're going to mention here as waiver wire ads are all flex plays, right? So I think it's McCormick versus this fringy receiver. Do I like this receiver's upside a little bit more this week, or do I like McCormick? Hey, I think we can lock in 15, 16, 17 carries because he's getting the coach speak from Antonio Pierce. We saw this treatment last year with Zamir White. And I think the matchup against the Falcons is pretty decent, and they are playing at home. So the one caveat is there's risk with McCormick where Desmond Ridder could just tank this entire offense. It doesn't matter. They're playing the Falcons, right? So that's the risk that you have to consider. I think that he's probably a floor play just because, hey, I feel like he's going to get a decent amount of touches. He's been efficient this year, 5.5 yards per carry. And he's gotten it done against tougher defenses than the Falcons, like the Chiefs, like the Denver Broncos. He's been efficient against those, and was obviously showed out against Tampa Bay last week. So I think he's a flex play at best, but don't jam him in over any guys that you're usually starting week in and week out.
Erickson, I'll stick with you. How about Tank Bigsby as one of these waiver wire pickups? He had 18 carries, 55 yards, and a touchdown in the win against the Titans. He also had 1 catch for 7 yards. Is Bigsby somebody that, I know the whole backfield's been a total headache this season in Jacksonville. Is he somebody that, a lot of people were picking him up this week, you're willing to start here in the first round of the fantasy playoffs?
Probably, my confidence level with this backfield is not super high, right? Because yes, last week it was Bigsby because it was a really close game. It was going back and forth, so they were able to kind of feed him. But what happens against the Jets? They're playing at home. They're underdogs. I kind of like the Jaguars to cover this game. I think it's going to be closer than I think. So maybe I should be a little bit more optimistic about Bigsby. I think Bigsby has a pretty high ceiling because if he gets rolling, we've seen teams run over the New York Jets run defense at times this year, but we've also seen teams struggle against the New York Jets run game, like the Miami Dolphins last week. They weren't able to really run the ball against the New York Jets. So yeah, it kind of goes back to he's probably flex play at best. And it's really him between some of these other receivers where you're kind of weighing the upside versus the downside case, because there's a chance that he just gets outsnapped by Etienne, if Mac Jones and this offense just implodes. So there's a lot of risk with some of these fringier running backs. And I kind of just want to rest on, look, I'm going to start the running backs I've been starting all year long. I'm not going to risk my fantasy playoffs on Tank Bigsby when he may not even lead his team in touches when it's all said and done playing for Jacksonville's offense. Like, I don't really think you need to play a Jaguars running back this week to win your fantasy football playoffs. So that's kind of how I'm viewing the situation. So I have him right behind McCormick, RB30.
Fitz, he's RB29 in ECR. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've got him at RB32, and I might be too low on him. Like, I think there's no denying that he is a better pure runner than Travis Etienne. And I think last I checked, Bigsby was either among the leaders or the leader in yards after contact per carry. Like, he's good. But Erickson framed it perfectly as far as how the game script could derail Bigsby potentially. Like, if the Jags fall into a hole, it is a Travis Etienne game script. If the Jags are competitive against the Jets, and they should be. The Jets are not that great. The effort level has been pretty inconsistent. If they're in a competitive game against the Jets, like, Bigsby might have smash potential, but it is a wide range of outcomes for him, and not like he's just not a comfortable start in week 15.
One more running back waiver wire ad here. Isaiah Davis for the Jets. This is, of course, if Breece Hall is out. Our Are They Playing tool on FantasyPros.com has Breece Hall at about a 38% chance to play. As of right now, we haven't seen practice reports for Thursday or anything yet, so subject to change, but, leaning towards not playing based on that tool. Obviously, everybody was really excited about Braylon Allen with Breece Hall out. But he and Isaiah Davis essentially split this backfield. Allen had 11 carries for 43 yards. Davis had 10 carries for 40 yards and a touchdown. Davis had 3 catches for 27 yards. Braylon Allen, 4 catches for 38 yards. Very similar stat lines. Davis, of course, got the touchdown, and he was the player that was available because Allen was largely already rostered. So, Fitz, Isaiah Davis, are you interested in starting him if Breece Hall is out again?
So this game with the running backs, it is the Spider-Man meme, but there are 4 Spider-Men. It's Braylon Allen pointing at Tank Bigsby and Isaiah Davis pointing at Travis Etienne. Like, it kind of depends on the game script. We've seen Davis show us pass catching chops the last couple of weeks. And good matchup with the Jaguars. They've allowed the second most fantasy points to running backs, and I think they've allowed the second most receiving yards to running backs. So potentially a good spot for Isaiah Davis if Breece Hall is out. So I've got him ranked running back 31 on the assumption that Breece doesn't play.
Erickson, what do you think about Isaiah Davis, but really this backfield in general?
Yeah, I would probably rank the other 2 running backs we talked about already ahead of Isaiah Davis, because I just feel better about those workloads in particular. And I feel like the Jaguars are kind of live here in this spot. I think they will be a closer game. So I do prefer Bigsby just because we've seen a bigger sample size with him versus some of these other Jets running backs, because it won't be a 50-50 committee if the Jaguars are establishing the run here against the Jets. And we've seen Tank Bigsby obviously have big games when he's gotten a lot of carries. Whereas, look, if Davis doesn't score the touchdowns, then we're just starting Braylon Allen, then like nothing changed, right? Because you said the usage was basically 50-50. Braylon Allen still started the game. So you can start running backs even in timeshares in positive matchups, but going back to the fact that you have every other running back that's healthy this week. You have all 32 teams. So there's a reason why these guys are outside the top or in that 30 range, because we don't need to push them up the rankings this week because we have everyone access to everybody. The only running back that I'm looking at that's kind of basically been a starter every single week that I might push out for one of these players we're talking about would be someone like Najee Harris, because he's got a brutal matchup against the Eagles. I don't like that. And he also splits carries with Jaylen Warren. So that's kind of where I'm looking at potential starters to sit for some of these waiver wire guys. But besides that, I really think you're starting the same guys you've been starting week in and week out who have been the starters in their respective backfield. So that's kind of I'm viewing the situation. Again, it's a flex play for me, but it's a 50-50 committee. If he doesn't score, then Allen's probably going to score instead.
This is a real stretch in the rankings of a headache. I mean, from from RB27 to RB32 is Sincere McCormick, Braylon Allen, Tank Bigsby, Jalen Warren, Isaiah Davis, Travis Etienne. So it's basically all the backfields we talked about plus Jalen Warren in there. Just a very difficult stretch to make any kind of decision, I would say. I want to remind everybody the NBA season is rolling along. Playing Pick 6 from DraftKings, an official partner of the NBA, is a way to get even more into the action following your favorite players. It's super simple to get started. First, download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, then select 2 or more players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat, like points, rebounds, three-pointers, and more. Track your picks for a shot at huge cash prizes. That's all there is to it. Pick 6 is available in most states, including California, Texas, Georgia, Missouri, and more. And for all first-time Pick 6 players, check this out. New customers play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. The fun of the NBA season continues with the most fun way to play fantasy sports. Pick 6 from DraftKings. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Fitz, who are you planting your flag on this week?
As an old man, let me cave up for another old man, Adam Thielen, who has had 21 targets over his last 2 games. He's caught 17 of them for 201 yards and a touchdown. Adam Thielen is just Bryce Young's favorite security blanket. And he was last year, too, when he had 103 catches. Thielen is looking healthy and frisky. I think Thielen is in for another good game against the Dallas Cowboys.
Erickson, what do you think about Thielen?
I mean, he showed out last week in a really tough matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles, but he's clearly like the established alpha in the Carolina Panthers passing game. He has a better matchup this week going against Dallas, playing at home. And we're kind of just seeing what we saw at the beginning of last year when Adam Thielen was basically a fringe fantasy wide receiver 1. Again, it was predictable that the wheels were going to fall off eventually, but because he missed so much time to start the year, he's fresh, right? So I expect him to continue to be productive here. And it seems so bizarre to think, hey, fantasy football championships are here, and you're kind of confidently starting Adam Thielen, especially because Bryce Young is playing so much better in a full PPR setting. Yeah, and I think that Bryce Young, too, is also overdue for some touchdown regression. Something I've noticed watching him over the last couple of weeks is they're throwing the ball a ton in the red zone, but it just hasn't really converted into touchdowns quite. He's top 5 in terms of red zone pass attempts, but I believe only has 3 passing touchdowns. If you look at everyone else inside the top 5 in terms of red zone passing attempts for the last 4 weeks, all those other quarterbacks are around 8 or more touchdowns. So some positive touchdown regression in a game where the Panthers are favored, as we talked about earlier this week, for the first time ever in the Bryce Young era. We're expecting good things from the Panthers for the first time ever. So yes, Thielen is a very strong start this week.
He's wide receiver 33 in ECR for the record. Erickson, who's your flag plant this week?
We don't know what's going on with AJB wide receiver 1 season, so I'm pivoting to BTJ wide receiver 1 season. Brian Thomas Jr. Look, this guy has been super productive, even with Mac Jones as his quarterback last 3 games, 29% target share, 44% air yard share, averaging over 81 receiving yards per game. I don't really care whether Sauce Gardner plays in this matchup against the Jets. He's been underwhelming this year. He's still a little bit banged up. And Brian Thomas Jr., you look at, I think he can take advantage of the Jets. What have they been weakest against this year is deep passes. 5th most deep passes faced this season. Last week, Brian Thomas Jr. was the only receiver on the Jaguars that saw more than 15 air yards. Whenever Mac Jones decides to throw the ball a little bit downfield, it's going to Brian Thomas Jr. So Mac Jones is mostly a dump-off quarterback. That's kind of what he's been with Jacksonville so far this season. But the time when he has time to throw, it's going to be to Brian Thomas Jr. And he's made so many plays all year long, despite the up and down quarterback play. I think that he can have a big game here against the New York Jets. Again, if the Jaguars come away with an upset, it's going to be because Tank Bigsby and Brian Thomas Jr., probably the 2 best offensive players that Jacksonville's had all season long, both step up and have big games. And I'm really confident that Brian Thomas Jr. is going to continue that.
Fitz, where do you rank Thomas this year or this week?
I think I have got him at wide receiver 25. I'm just going to check on that real quickly, but let's see. Yes, wide receiver 25. And Erickson said it pretty well. Like Mac Jones has been unable to kneecap the fantasy value of Brian Thomas Jr., which speaks to the talent level of Brian Thomas Jr. and what a good player he is. So, yeah, I feel pretty good about playing him this week.
Where do you think this is kind of looking ahead, obviously not for this week, but Erickson, where do you think you're going to be ranking Thomas for next year's drafts?
Probably ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. I think I can probably feel pretty good about that. I probably, man, where would I mean, see, like doing it off the cuff is so hard because I'm going to throw out a number.
I'm putting you on the spot, but I think he's a really interesting player to think about this conversation for.
I think, I mean, top 24, is that too light? Not aggressive enough? Again, it's just like, simply put, rookie receiver breaks out year one, you got to draft that guy next year, right? Like that's the simple process that works more often than not. If a guy hits his rookie year as a rookie, especially at the wide receiver position, you want exposure to him the following season. So top 24, I think should be a lock. I may not be high enough with that particular ranking because again, I haven't gone through all the players. I'm sure that I'm forgetting somebody to put into that top 24, but definitely someone that I've been very pleased with and had the quarterback play. Had anything gone a little bit more right in Jacksonville, he's probably having an even better season. I mean, his yards per route run is off the charts. And the fact that he's been able to do it with a dysfunctional offense overall, Trevor Lawrence banged up all season long. Christian Kirk's not going to be part of this offense moving forward. I mean, he's the alpha moving forward. So yeah, top 24 and probably someone that I'm probably going to rank. I'm going to convince myself to probably rank higher when I actually do my 2025 rankings.
Not having sat down and written out players' names and seeing who actually needs to be ahead of him yet, my initial thought when I asked the question was kind of back end of the top 20. So a little higher than top 24 was my first thought. It'll depend on how things go this offseason in Jacksonville, of course. Fitz, what do you think about that question? Where's your gut reaction, early thoughts on ranking Thomas next year?
Yeah, mid-range wide receiver 2 in that sort of wide receiver 16 to wide receiver 21 range. And I might have him ranked ahead of Malik Nabers too next year. It hasn't really happened for Malik Nabers since he had the concussion. And I know the quarterback situation has been gross, but is there a quarterback who's going to come in and dramatically upgrade the situation for the pass catchers on the Giants? I don't like this rookie quarterback class at all. None of these guys are saviors. And, maybe you bring in Sam Darnold and I feel better about Malik Nabers. But otherwise, I may very well have Brian Thomas ranked the highest of the rookies from the class of 2024.
Guys, low testosterone affects about 30% of adult men in America. Are you feeling the drag of fatigue, noticing a dip in muscle mass, or sensing a slump in libido? If so, it's time to get your testosterone levels tested. If you have low T, Kizotrex is an FDA-approved pill that's changing the game in testosterone replacement therapy. In fact, Kizotrex restored testosterone levels in nearly 9 out of 10 clinical study participants, and its unique formulation bypasses the liver to avoid liver damage. It's time to break free from injections, pellets, and gels. Choose Kizotrex and take a step toward being the hero of your life again. To see if you qualify, visit Kizotrex.com and take the low T quiz today. That's KYZATREX.com. By prescription only, Kizotrex is a controlled substance and can be a target of abuse. Kizotrex is not for use in pregnant women or men with prostate or breast cancer. Safety and efficacy in those younger than 18 is not known. Tell your doctor about all medical conditions and medications. Serious side effects could include increased blood pressure, worsening prostate symptoms, increased risk of prostate cancer, blood clots in the legs or lungs, decreased sperm count, liver problems, enlarged or painful breasts, and breathing problems while you sleep. Common side effects include swelling of the ankles, feet, or body, increased red blood cell count, and increase in prostate-specific antigen or PSA levels. PSA is a test used to detect prostate cancer. Report these symptoms to your doctor. Call your doctor to learn more about Kizotrex. For questions or more information, visit www.kizotrex.com or call 1-833-949-5040. All right, guys, let's dive into the player debates here. Starting off with a couple of names that most people are starting, but just in case you have to put them against each other, Rico Dowdle or Aaron Jones. Erickson, what do you think about that one?
I think, both guys need to be in your lineup. I prefer Aaron Jones just because I prefer the infrastructure around the Minnesota Vikings playing at home against the Chicago Bears. Their run defense has been absolutely atrocious. So where Dowdle, again, has also a really great matchup, he's also playing on the road. And if I'm weighing, hey, which offense is just likely to potentially bottom out, it would be Dallas on a short week playing on the East Coast versus the Vikings playing at home. Aaron Jones has been healthy. So, yeah, I'm just going to take Aaron Jones.
I just to kind of set the stage, I totally agree with you that these are an example of two names that you want to be starting. I do think when we've talked about how there really haven't been many, knock on wood, injuries to the running back position this year. And now there's no more buys. We finally got through the ridiculous 6-team buy in week 14. So there are now, I think, going to be tough decisions with names that you want to be starting multiple guys at a position like running back, especially if you have somebody like Rico Dowdle that you probably drafted, several rounds later. in your drafts, and he's now looking like a really startable guy. So that's why I wanted to include a name like this. Just for the record, I obviously recognize that these are both names that in a vacuum, we're ranking highly and want to be starting. What do you think, Fitz, Jones, or Dowdle this week?
I like Rico considerably more, actually. He's had 2 straight 100-yard rushing games. He's had no fewer than 18 carries in any of his last 3 games. He's also had 7 receptions in his last 3 games. The Cowboys they are basing their offense on Rico now. Like, they have fully committed to him. And, Rico gets this great matchup against the Panthers, who rank dead last in DVOA against the run and have given up more fantasy points, rushing yards, and rushing touchdowns to running backs than any other team. It's a good matchup for Aaron Jones, too. The Bears' run defense ranks 30th in DVOA. But last week was the first time in a month that Aaron Jones hasn't fumbled in a game. And we saw the fumbling issues crop up with the Cardinals 2 weeks ago, where he fumbled twice and wound up with 5 carries in that game. Like, that's my concern, that Aaron Jones coughs up another fumble and gets thrown into fumble jail, and we don't see him get double-digit carries. Like, that's the risk with him. He could absolutely smash, but so could Rico, and I'm not worried about Rico getting benched for fumbling problems.
Where do you actually have these guys ranked, Fitz?
11th for Rico, 20th for Aaron Jones. But that sounds like a big gap, but there's a big tier in RB2 of guys who I don't see much of a difference between.
Where do you have them ranked, Erickson? By the way, in ECR, Rico is RB16, Aaron Jones RB18.
I have Aaron Jones at RB14, and I have Rico at RB17. And I mean, we also seen Aaron Jones play the Bears already this season on the road. He had 25 touches for over 130 yards and a touchdown. So, I just don't want to overthink it with Aaron Jones. He's playing such a bad Bears defense at home, and the Vikings are going to score. They're going to score 30 points, and I think that he's just safer. So.
Let's look at another pair of running backs here. Fitz, I'll start with you this one. Rhamondre Stevenson or Najee Harris? Who do you like better this week?
So I can already tell I like Najee more than Erickson does. I would start Najee here. I've got them ranked back-to-back, but I've got Najee RB24 and Stevenson RB25. Look, I know it's not an easy matchup for Najee against the Eagles, but the Steelers are going to run the ball. They're going to keep running the ball. That's just how they roll. And especially with George Pickens out, they really have no choice but to run the offense through the running backs. And that's probably going to mean a few receptions for him too. I know he shares work, but yet Najee still gets at least 16 carries a game week in and week out. So, with this collectively poor group of pass catchers for the Steelers without George Pickens, and as good as the Eagles' pass defense is, I have no doubt about the volume here with Najee, and I'm just going to follow the volume. Stevenson, over his last 7 games, he's averaging 3.1 yards per carry. He's had fewer than 20 rushing yards in 3 of those 7 games. The decent games he's had during that stretch where it was just 73 or 74 yards, all against really bad run defenses, the Bears in week 10, the Rams in week 11, the Colts in week 14. And Rhamondre's gone 4 straight games without a touchdown. So I'm just not feeling good about the trajectory Rhamondre is on, whereas I know at least Najee is going to get a ton of work this week.
What do you think, Erickson? You did kind of allude to Najee maybe being a sit given the matchup this week. Is that how you feel in this particular head-to-head?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's crazy to think that the Patriots could score more points than the Steelers this week. Vegas has it that way. Patriots have a higher implied team total than the Steelers do because the Steelers are playing in a tougher matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers. We just saw the Cardinals get destroyed by Zach Charbonnet. And we've seen Rhamondre, yes, he's one of the more boomery bust types of running backs. I've talked about how, especially in the forecast, how he's kind of like the Amari Cooper of running backs, where he has games where he just totally does nothing outside the top 40 and tanks you. But he also has games where he finishes a top 10 running back overall, because when he does end up scoring those touchdowns, which have eluded him the last couple of weeks, well, he smashes. I mean, 3 of his last 4 games, he has 18 or more carries. So I think that I just saw what Zach Charbonnet did to this Cardinals defense. You don't think the Patriots notice that too and think, hey, let's feed Rhamondre? I think he has a higher ceiling than Najee Harris does in a game where the higher total game is Cardinals Patriots, not Eagles and Steelers. So if we're chasing points here, who has more touchdown upside just from a game environment perspective? I think it is Rhamondre. And I also do think it's close. Like I have these guys ranked back to back, but if I had to put one in, I'm going to take the guy who I think is always the best running back on his own team, which is Rhamondre Stevenson, whereas Jaylen Warren is a lot better over the last couple weeks since he's been healthy. So if the Steelers are playing from behind, is it Najee as much in the game, or is it more Jaylen Warren? So that would be my concern and potential pushback on Najee seeing this insane workload, whereas I still like the matchup a little bit more for Rhamondre, and I still expect him to be featured more than Antonio Gibson.
Got a couple wide receiver debates here. How about Fitz, Courtland Sutton, or Garrett Wilson, which is not a debate I expected to ask in August if you told me I would be pitting these two against each other, but they're ranked pretty closely together, and it feels like a tough one. So Sutton or Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, and I would not have guessed in August that I would be answering Courtland Sutton here over Garrett Wilson, but here we are with Courtland Sutton, the wide receiver 5.5 point PPR fantasy points per game since week 8. 16.5 half point PPR fantasy points per game since then. Over that 6-game stretch, he's averaging 7 catches, 94.8 yards per game. Sutton's just been fantastic over the last month and a half, and he is the undisputed alpha receiver for the Broncos, whereas the Jets kind of have co-alphas with Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. I'm not going to badmouth Garrett Wilson at all. I think he's terrific, but I just don't find the Jets offense especially trustworthy right now.
What do you think about this one, Erickson?
Yeah, it's got to be Courtland Sutton, just because he's the number one, right? It's him and then a bunch of jabronis for the Denver Broncos, whereas the Jets, like Fitz alluded to, they have co-alphas. So if Wilson doesn't score the touchdown and it's Devontae Adams that scores the touchdown, then you're left holding the bag being, make another 6 for 60 game for Garrett Wilson on 12 targets. Great. Don't feel great about that. Whereas Sutton, I mean, if you just look at his, I mean, we usually don't recommend just like looking at the box score, but ever since that game against the Saints where he had the 0 targets, dude has just been on an absolute tear, and he's playing the Colts. The Colts gave up 400 yards of offense to the Patriots. So I'm expecting that this Broncos offense is going to be very productive, and that's going to feature Courtland Sutton, because that's the, again, besides Bo Nix, like who else are you trusting from Denver to do anything like individually, because we have no idea what this backfield's going to look like, as we'll get into a little bit later on.
Yeah, we've got a question on the backfield coming up. Where do you have these guys? Is it close, or do you have them actually a sizable gap between Sutton and Wilson?
I know ECR has a pretty sizable gap. I'm a little bit more closer with them. I've Sutton at 14, Garrett Wilson at 15. I mean, he's playing Wilson's playing the Jaguars, right? I mean, you could see him. This could be a ceiling game for him. It's just a matter of, well, do you think he catches the touchdown? When more often than not, it's usually Devontae that catches the touchdown. Or, you have to remember that Jaguars are really bad against tight ends. So is it Tyler Conklin that randomly finds the end zone? So, and it's also Aaron Rodgers, right? Anytime you feel safe about playing Aaron Rodgers, he somehow is very underwhelming, which I don't think is a hot take by any means. And whereas Bo Nix, he's been steady, he's been more consistent, and the same thing with Courtland Sutton, just been like the model of consistency.
It looks like on your rankings, Fitz, that you have a wider get. You have both Sutton higher than Erickson and Wilson lower than Erickson.
Yeah, wide receiver 11 for Sutton, wide receiver 21 for Wilson.
All right. Let's go to another debate here amongst the wide receivers. DK Metcalf or Zay Flowers? Erickson, what do you think about that one?
Zay Flowers for me. He's playing the Giants. They're one of the worst defenses overall. They lost Dexter Lawrence. They're really bad against the deep ball. So the thing with Metcalf, I just don't know how healthy Metcalf is. His production has basically dipped in 4 straight weeks since their bye week. I don't think that he's totally dust at this point. Like, I think that his production is going to come eventually, but I'm not loving the matchup against Green Bay necessarily. The Seahawks are leaning more on their defense and running the ball more effectively. So I'm not so sure we're seeing as much of, okay, we're going to just let Geno cook here. He's going to throw the ball all over the Green Bay Packers. Like, I don't think that's their formula for success anymore. Whereas I'll take my chances, hoping that it is Zay Flowers that converts a big game against a matchup that he can exploit. And if I'm wrong and it just ends up being Derrick Henry with 8 touchdowns, so be it. I don't think that I'm going to get upset about my process starting the number 1 wide receiver against the Giants, who have been terrible against. I mean, Zay Flowers could get it done on one play. Like, he got just 1 deep pass for 80 yards for a touchdown, and you're feeling great about it. Whereas Metcalf, he's been underwhelming the last month, and I feel like I've been ranking him higher than ECR and been disappointed every single week. So I've kind of moved him down a little bit, firmly behind JSN, just because I don't believe that he's like 100% healthy.
Zay hasn't been that involved in the last month. I mean, 4 catches, 2 catches, 5 catches, 3 catches. He has 1 touchdown in that span. He has 1 game in double digits scoring in half PPR, and that game was just 10.9 points. He hasn't had like a big blow up in a while. And I am more worried than you, Erickson, that not worried, but like I think the Ravens are just going to pound Henry in this game and not need to throw like more than 18 times is kind of my expectation. So I'm pretty worried about the usage for Zay. Not to say that there's not a reason to be slightly concerned about what we've seen from Metcalf either. That's kind of why I wanted to pit these guys against each other. What do you think, Fitz? Do you also agree that, it's just Flowers, he's facing the Giants, don't overthink it, or do you prefer Metcalf?
No, you expressed my concerns about Flowers pretty well, Worm. And I still have him ranked as a low-end wide receiver 2, wide receiver 23. And it's nothing against Zay, but his target and reception volume has tapered off lately. And he has not had double-digit targets in a game or more than 5 catches in a game since October. It's been a while. So you just pointed that out, Worm. And yes, against the Giants, doesn't this feel like a game where maybe we don't see Lamar Jackson get to 25 pass attempts? So whereas I think Green Bay, Seattle has sneaky shootout potential, I don't fear that matchup at all with no Jair Alexander for the Packers. In fact, I kind of like it because I have a feeling that we're going to see DK Metcalf run a good number of his routes against Eric Stokes, and that is a plus matchup. And I know, like, I'm already seeing a lot of Discord questions about whether people should start DK Metcalf this week because he has had 4 straight games without a touchdown, 4 straight games with 70 or fewer receiving yards. And I realize maybe the emergence of Jackson Smith and Jigba is diminishing DK's output a little bit. But at the same time, like, Tyler Lockett has just disappeared from this offense. So I'm just going to continue to bet on DK Metcalf, the guy who over his career has averaged 9 touchdowns a season and almost 1,100 yards. Like, I still think he's one of the best 20 receivers in the game.
Erickson, if you had to pick which of these 2 receivers is more likely to score a touchdown this week, because Zay only has 4 this season. 2 of them came in that Broncos game, and DK Metcalf only has 3 this season and none since week 7. So they haven't, neither of them have been, hitting pay dirt.
I mean, I'm gonna just go with who I think what team's gonna score more touchdowns. So give me the Ravens, give me Zay Flowers.
Okay. Quick reminder for everybody, we've got a special offer for you all. Unlock a month of Betting Pros Premium for free. Download the Betting Pros app today. Use promo code FPFREE. Get access to tools like the Same Game Parlay tool, the Prop Bet Analyzer, and the Prize Picks Prop Bet Cheat Sheet. Don't miss out. Try it free for 1 month now. Available on iOS and Android. Again, that's Betting Pros Premium for free. Promo code FPFREE. All right, guys, more rapid fire start sit decisions here. Running back, Erickson, Gus Edwards, or Nick Chubb?
Gus Edwards for me. I like the Chargers' offensive outlook more than I like the Cleveland Browns. So I think you're just hoping for a touchdown with one of these guys. I think that's really the best way to get any type of production. And I think LA has a better chance of getting more points than the Browns do against the Chiefs.
What do you think, Fitz? Gus Edwards and Nick Chubb, by the way, back-to-back in ECR, and they are the 2 names that come after that kind of group I mentioned earlier of McCormick, Allen, Bigsby, Warren, Davis, Etienne. The 2 names after them are Edwards and Chubb.
Yeah, battle of the plotters here. It's Godzilla versus Mothra. Yeah, I'm going to take Chubb because I think he's like 10 times the player that Gus Edwards is. And I know the matchup is brutal. Chiefs have allowed the fewest fantasy points to running backs, but like, this is a Todd Bowles defense that Gus Edwards is running against, and Todd Bowles defenses are always pretty good against the run. The Buccaneers have allowed the 9th fewest rushing yards to running backs this season, and they've only given up 6 rushing touchdowns to running backs. So I'm just going to go with the better player.
Yeah, it's Gus Zilla versus Chubbra, I guess. Chubbra sounds like that might be dirty. I hope it's actually not. Not a real word.
Chubbzilla's not.
Yeah. Okay, let's do a wide receiver one here. Calvin Ridley or Malik Nabers. Fitz, what do you think about that one?
Ridley, sturdier floor, at least 5 receptions in 6 of his last 7 games. As for Nabers, like, look, I know the matchup against the Ravens has appeal to a lot of people. But like, can we count on Drew Lock to take advantage of a good matchup in the passing game? A banged up Drew Lock, no less.
It's didn't they say it's going to be Tommy DeVito, or did it?
That's what I thought.
Oh, is it DeVito?
They did announce that.
Oh,
Yeah, you might
I'm
have
sorry,
yeah.
I missed that. Yes. All right. Well, Tommy DeVito against the Ravens. Can Tommy DeVito take advantage? Since coming back from his concussion in week 7, Malik Nabers is averaging 61.9 receiving yards a game, 9.6 yards per catch, 5.9 yards per target, and he has not scored a touchdown in any of those 7 games. He is tied for wide receiver 38 in fantasy points per game since week 7. I love the guy, but Nabers is just stuck in this unhealthy offensive ecosystem. I'm going to go with Calvin Ridley.
What do you think on this one, Erickson, Ridley, or Nabers?
Yeah, I think it's Calvin Ridley for me. I mean, he's someone they could both see double-digit targets, but just give me targets from 75%. 75% of Will Levis is still better than Tommy DeVito. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like the guy's barely an NFL starting quarterback. And as someone that watched Nabers last week, had the under on his receiving yards, and I thought it was so locked and loaded. I thought he was going to be limited. It's like 75.5 receiving yards, had the under. He had, I think, 40 yards getting into the fourth quarter, and then somehow he willed his way, Drew Lock. And I was like, oh my God, how did this bet not cash? So I was upset about that, but I don't think it was a miracle that Drew Lock got to 200 passing yards last week. Like, I honestly do not know how he got it done. So yes, Malik Nabers you got to go with Calvin Ridley here.
I feel like I get it. I feel like I could easily see Nabers, like the way that the secondary has, performed for the Ravens all year, just get the ball in his hands and see if he breaks one, similar to what Jamar Chase has done a bunch of times against this Ravens secondary. I'm not totally surprised given the quarterback stuff and the injury concerns with Nabers that he's wide receiver 23 in ECR. I was surprised that Ridley was wide receiver 21. I guess just given, kind of what we've seen from him recently, just in terms of the targets and the fact that he's going up against the Bengals, I was expecting him to be not too much higher, but inside the top 20 at least. But they're only 2 spots apart in ECR fits. Ridley at wide receiver 21, Nabers at wide receiver 23. Does that small gap seem right to you?
No, I've got Ridley inside the top 20. I've got him at wide receiver 16, and I've got Nabers at 10 spots lower, wide receiver 26.
Yeah, I think that's kind of more what I would have expected. Let's look at some flex plays here. Erickson, Tyrone, Tracy, again in that Giants-Ravens game, or Jordan Addison, who has obviously coming off this huge 3-touchdown performance.
Jordan Addison. I'm just going to stay in the flames. Guy's on a heater, and he destroyed the Bears. Last time he played him, 8 catches, 162 yards, and a touchdown on 14 targets. I don't imagine the Bears will just try to stop Justin Jefferson because they know that Addison can do this to them. But even so, he only gets 9 targets. I mean, he's shown that he can be extremely efficient. The Minnesota Vikings offense is rolling right now, and the Bears are going in the complete opposite direction. So Tyrone Tracy, yes, the workload is great. The targets are great. This offense could just bottom out and he could have 20 touches for 30 yards, right? So that's like the main concern. So Addison I want the ceiling with Jordan Addison, and even, he finishes 4 for 40. That could not be that different from what Tyrone Tracy does, and just a brutal matchup on paper just against a team that is well beyond where the Giants are right now.
Where do you have Addison ranked amongst receivers this week?
He's like a tough guy to rank because he's the number 2 on his team, but he also he's blowing up randomly. So he's in my top 30. But if you want to argue he should be a top 20 receiver, he had 3 touchdowns last week. I can't argue against you. It's just, he's one of these guys where, yes, the projections are going to say one thing with him because, we can only project him for an X amount of targets, but he's also been on fire. So can he be ranked ahead of guys like J-Mo or Darnell Mooney? It's like, yes, because those guys are in similar roles, and he's obviously been the hotter guy. So, I have it 29, but if I'm wrong about that, I would not be surprised.
Fitz, what do you think about this one, Tracy or Addison?
I'm going with Addison too. Over the last 6 weeks, he's the wide receiver 6 in half points PPR fantasy scoring. And I know there's a wide range of outcomes for Addison. He was not faring so well earlier in the season. He's had 5, he's played 11 games. In 5 of them, he's got 42 or fewer receiving yards. But Tracy, it's just a brutal matchup for him against the Ravens' run defense, and his offensive line is completely falling apart. Obviously, the Giants have been without stud left tackle Andrew Thomas for a while. They have also been playing without tackle Jermaine Illuminor.
Former Raven.
I always have a hard time pronouncing his last name. And they just lost guard John Runyon to an ankle injury. So, decimated offensive line against a really tough run defense. I could see Erickson's outcome here taking hold for sure. 20 touches, 30 yards. He's like Tracy's had fewer than 50 rushing yards in 3 straight. And his last 2 games were against the Cowboys and Saints, which are not exactly impregnable run defenses.
Let's look at another flex here. Fitz, I'll start with you on this one. DeAndre Swift or a guy we already talked about, Brian Thomas Jr.
Oh, Brian Thomas Jr. for sure. I mean, like he has produced even with Mac Jones last week, 12 targets, 8 catches, 86 yards. Swift's been dealing with a groin injury. He's had fewer than 40 rushing yards in 3 straight games, and he's going up against a Minnesota run defense that ranks 3rd in DVOA and has allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points to running backs.
Erickson, what do you think about this one, Swift or Thomas? I know you're a Thomas guy.
Yeah, it's going to be Thomas for me, but just like pointing out, I think Swift is starting to run out of gas at this point. Again, he's another running back that we always enter the season with some type of like injury concerns, like how is he going to hold up to his workload? So again, going back to, yes, a lot of these running backs have stayed healthy, but how healthy are they from an effective standpoint? He has under 40 rushing yards in 3 straight games, right? And it's not like he hasn't seen like decent amount of volume, but the game scripts haven't gone in the way. I mean, the Chicago Bears basically are giving the opposing team 20 points in the first half. So then they can't even really establish any type of run game. So again, against Minnesota a couple weeks back, he had 13 carries for 30 yards, 3 catches for 35 yards. So, I mean, does he have a 6-7 point floor? Yes. I think you can do better with all 32 teams available. And Brian Thomas Jr. would definitely be a better bet, in my opinion.
How about, Erickson, I'll go to you here. Rachaad White or Jerry Jeudy this week?
I think if Bucky Irving doesn't play, I want to start Rachaad White. I think he's had such a weird run out because he looked like a bust at the beginning of the year, and then he just went on this unreal touchdown scoring spree where he's like continues to get it done every single week, kind of like the Chiefs winning all these games. So, and he's looked a lot better. Again, not as good as Bucky Irving and maybe even Sean Tucker to some extent, but he's definitely taken on this new running scheme that Liam Cohen has implemented and done pretty well for himself. So I do like Rachaad White, especially against the Chargers who don't stack the box. Buccaneers have been really good against light fronts this season. So be Rachaad White for me if Bucky doesn't play. But if Bucky's in there, we have more of a committee. You got to stay in the flames with Jerry Jeudy. I mean, he's just been so good. He's been so efficient with Jameis Winston. And even though he's been, and the thing that's impressive the most for me is he's not even doing it on like this crazy amount of volume. Like Njoku is seeing more targets than Jerry Jeudy is. Elijah Moore is seeing just as many targets as Jerry Jeudy's, but Jerry Jeudy's the one that's been the most consistent, scoring touchdowns, making big plays. And the Chiefs defense has been overrated since they lost Jalen Watson. They're one of their cornerbacks. They also lost Joshua Williams last week as well. So I think this Chiefs Browns game could kind of be sneaky fun because we got some problems with both secondaries. So I would go with Jeudy if Bucky Irving is playing.
Yeah, there have been, I think, 6 games since Jameis Winston took over as quarterback in Cleveland. And in 5 of them, Jeudy either has 11 plus targets or 6 or fewer targets. There's only been 1 game that's kind of like right in that middle zone. So kind of up and down from that perspective, but the production has been there every single week. Fitz, Jeudy this week or Rachaad White?
So I agree that if Rachaad White, that if Bucky Irving doesn't play, then you have to go with Rachaad White, especially since we didn't see Sean Tucker very involved last week with Bucky Irving out. But if Bucky Irving does play, then I'm going with Jeudy. And maybe not the easiest matchup in the world for Jeudy. Friend of the show, Jacob Gibbs of CBS, pointed out that Jeudy has not fared all that well against press coverage, and the Chiefs play press coverage at a pretty high rate. But, like Jeudy is still just awash in targets from Jameis Winston. Like he is pretty much getting to double-digit targets every week. And like that volume usually pays off more often than not. So I prefer Jeudy over White if indeed White is in a committee with Bucky Irving.
Fitz, last one here for the flexes. Quentin Johnston or any Denver running back. Obviously, the Broncos backfield has been a huge headache all season. They're facing the Colts, who are not a good rush defense, to put it kindly, but they've just been so frustrating. So any of them, you choose, or Quentin Johnston.
Okay, this is conditional again. If Ladd McConkey is ruled out, I will take QJ against the Buccaneers. If Ladd McConkey plays, I will roll with Jaleel McLaughlin over Quentin Johnston. And I know Sean Payton's running back usage is wildly unpredictable, hence your framing of this question, giving us the any Denver running back selection. But in week 13, before the Broncos bye was Jaleel McLaughlin leading the way with 14 carries for 84 yards against the Browns. He looked good in that game. And McLaughlin is like the quickest, most elusive of Denver's backs. He also has some pass catching upside. And as you said, Worm, good matchup against the Colts, who will have the second most rushing yards to running backs. So if Ladd McConkey is playing, I would go with Jaleel McLaughlin over Quentin Johnston.
Fitz, you're falling into the trap. Oh, he looked good last week. Peyton's going to go back to him. You can insert any name into there because we said that about Javonte this year. We said that about Estimate this year.
This will be the 25 carry Audric Estimate game, I'm sure.
Exactly. Erickson, any Denver running back or Quentin Johnston?
Fitz, I can't believe you didn't go back to your flag plant, Quentin Johnston, when he's prime against this terrible Buck. I'm going Quentin Johnston because the way I look at it, Quentin Johnston has a 55% catch rate this season. And there's a 33% chance I'll pick the right Denver Broncos running back. So with those odds, give me the 55% over the 33%. So I'm going to go with QJ. The Buccaneers are horrible, and I'll take my chances with him catching the touchdown where he'll be wide open versus trying to pick which Broncos running back will be the Sean Payton du jour this week. If anything, I'm looking at this from a live betting perspective where I honestly think Payton goes in, and he doesn't know who he's going to feature either. But he watches the first drive. He's like, all right, that guy looks good. Let's ride him. So I'm going to test that out this week, watching this Broncos game to see, all right, is this what Sean Payton's really doing? He just watches the first drive. Whoever looks good gets fed that particular week. Because obviously anything he says or anything we see the week before means nothing because it has not helped us at all protecting these guys on a week-to-week basis.
I thought you were about to accuse Sean Payton of having an underling on the bench live betting running back rushing totals during the game.
That I wouldn't put it past him.
Someone's got to check this out.
Yeah. Quarterback decision here. Sam Darnold or Jared Goff? Fitz, who do you like better?
Oh, Darnold. Vikings have been really good at home. 27.9 points a game in home games. Darnold has averaged 251 passing yards and 2.4 touchdown passes in home games. He gets the Bears, who just a couple of weeks ago, he hit up for 330 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. So I might have Goff ranked too low. I've got him quarterback 15. On the one hand, you'd think the Bills have the firepower to turn this game in against the Lions into a shootout, which might boost Goff's upside and keep the Lions from going run heavy. But then again, you'd think that would be the case for all of the Bills' opponents this season, and yet the Bills have allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. So I think Darnold's the better percentage play.
Erickson, who do you prefer?
I'm chasing the points with this Bills-Lions game. Again, Goff, it seems the thing that holds him back most of the time for fantasy production is just that the Lions just decide to run the ball and they just don't give him enough opportunities to score touchdowns. But in this game where you could see them in a pass-heavy game script with all the weapons they have offensively, this could be a Jared Goff 5 touchdown game. This could be his best game of the year statistically. So I think it's worth chasing. So I'm going to go with Goff.
While we're on the quarterbacks, I want to ask you guys, I am the lone Fantasy Pros representative still alive in the Scott Fishbowl playoffs, and I have a quarterback decision to make. It's super flex, so I need two. One of them is Sam Darnold, who I am starting. But the other two, we don't typically talk about Thursday players, but just because I want you guys to help me out. Matthew Stafford or Anthony Richardson. I am very torn on those two. Erickson, do you have a preference there for my second quarterback?
Don't the Scott Fishbowl settings kill quarterbacks that are inaccurate and turn the ball over?
No, they.
I mean, I don't remember what again. My team was so bad. I kind of stopped paying attention to it. So you got to tell me the quarterback.
The settings really favor running quarterbacks because you get points for first downs, and I think you only get a point for every 50 passing yards.
I forget the exact number, but
40,
yes,
maybe it's 40. But it definitely, I think, points toward Richardson for me.
But it's just so hard to be I'm in this big, there's 500 teams left. You can't get a dud from somebody. And Richardson has had duds this year.
So the last few weeks of the Scott Fishbowl playoffs cut the playoff field in half, right? I was in the last round and unfortunately had a bunch of people on bye, so I'm no longer around. But it went from 1,000 people to 500. Isn't it a deeper cut this week? Isn't it only 200 or 100 make it out of this week? So
I believe it's another half. I think it goes to 250. I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, I think you should chase the upside here with Richardson.
with Richardson.
Agreed with the mobile boost. I mean, even if you just look at raw projections from like a normal, like the thing with Stafford, he has to throw like 4 touchdowns, right? Like it's so easy for if Richardson just gets rushing 40 yards and a touchdown, like you're already in the clear. So like his bar to pass and get the matchup is horrible. But if they just run him in the end zone, like you're going to be fine.
I have Richardson in now, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't.
That's the right call.
Underthinking it. Puka's looks so good. Everything.
Imagine underthinking something in fantasy football. Right?
All right. Thank you for that little sidetrack there. Tight end, Tucker Kraft or Pat Freiermuth. 2 guys who have, I think, been in this segment a lot this year, but I don't know that I've ever actually put the 2 of them against each other. So I will now. Tucker Kraft or Pat Freiermuth. Fitz, who do you like?
Tucker Kraft. In the 10 games since Jordan Love came back from his early season knee injury, Tucker Kraft has had 7 touchdown catches. Target distribution is always guesswork with these Green Bay pass catchers, but Kraft has been Love's favorite red zone target. And he's also got a pretty good matchup against the Seahawks, who've given up the 8th most receptions and 10th most receiving yards to tight ends. I know the target outlook theoretically gets better for Pat Freiermuth with George Pickens out, but Pickens was out last week and Freiermuth had 3 targets. Now, granted, he did turn those 3 targets into 3 catches for 48 yards and a touchdown, but Freiermuth is averaging 3.8 targets a game this year, and a tough matchup against the Eagles have allowed the 8th fewest fantasy points to tight ends. So I'll take Tucker Kraft.
Erickson, Kraft, or Freiermuth?
Tucker Kraft for me too. Love the man. Let's go.
I'm not going to lie. This I thought was a good, kind of head to head based on where they're ranked. I also have to make that decision in Scott Fishbowl. So I was definitely using this outline to have you guys help
your own selfish needs.
Well, I have McBride in that league, but tight ends get so much that it's worth considering.
We know what McBride's doing this week. Yeah. We all know.
Yeah, you're all over that.
Not scoring a touchdown. Oh, sorry.
Well, we're about to get to that. Quick reminder for everybody, though. Say goodbye to start-sit dilemmas with FantasyPros start-sit assistant. I will be using that for Scott Fishbowl this week, of course. Within seconds, you'll know exactly who to play for optimal results each and every week. Leveraging insights from numerous experts, the start-sit assistant aligns your lineup decisions with the top minds in fantasy football, giving you a competitive edge. Maximize your lineup's potential with just a few clicks. Head to fantasypros.com/myplaybook and make winning decisions in no time. Touchdown calls contest. Erickson, do you want to start us off with your tight end?
Yeah, it's going to be Trey McBride. Talked about in the prediction show. He may score 1, 2, or maybe even 3 touchdowns. So 16 red zone targets. Patriots are not going to be able to stop Trey McBride. And it's actually funny. Like the books have gotten notice about Trey McBride's like touchdownless streak. So there's a special on this is DraftKings Sportsbook. There's a special on Trey McBride to have 9 catches, but not to score a touchdown. And it's called Trey McBride's Made.
Oh, that's brilliant.
At plus 700. So if you think I'm wrong, you want to fade me, plus 700, he catches 9 balls, doesn't score. There you go.
I love that, honestly. That's great.
This Trey McBride touchdown allergy, though, this is a real thing. Like this goes back to his last year at Colorado State when he had like 300 catches and 1 touchdown. Like for whatever reason, this dude just cannot get into the end zone.
Yeah. I think it's funny too because it's not like he hasn't scored any touchdowns this year. He has 2, but one's a rushing touchdown and one is a fumble that he recovered in the end zone.
Yeah. Yeah, it is wild. All right, so Trey McBride is Erickson's pick at touchdown. Fitz, who's your running back?
Isaiah Pacheco. Like he is due. He's going to get into the end zone for the first time since coming back from injury. And you know what? This part of this is totally wish casting because, as I mentioned, Isaiah Pacheco was my hero running back in a couple of leagues. Well, one of those leagues I still managed to somehow get into the fantasy playoffs, and I need Pacheco to come through for me this week.
I had a lot of builds like that as well with Pacheco, so I'm also hoping for a big week from him. At wide receiver, I've got Courtland Sutton. We already talked about it; just been so consistent recently. Matchup's not scary in this one, coming off the bye week. So we've got tight end Trey McBride, at running back Isaiah Pacheco, and at wide receiver Courtland Sutton. We will wrap up there. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Best of luck here in the fantasy playoffs here in week 15. As a reminder, we'll be doing the show throughout the entire fantasy playoffs, so we'll be with you every round that you are surviving, or if you just want to get a sense of the week, you can continue to keep listening. We would love to hear that you're doing that. But hopefully everybody's staying alive and advancing here. For Erickson and Fitz, I'm Ryan Wormeli. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you again next time.